Flaster Greenberg presents New Jersey's Site Remediation Reform Act, a practical approach. This program was recorded November 18, 2009 at Flaster Greenberg's Conference Center in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. In this segment, RAOs versus NFAs and the new permit program, with Marty Judge, a shareholder in Flaster Greenberg.
I'm going to talk about two interrelated topics. The first being RAOs versus NFAs, and the second being the DEP's new permit program for implementation of remediations. The big question is, what's the difference between an RAO and an NFA? Well, basically, they're the same. The response action outcome is a formal document issued by the LSRP certifying that a remediation has been completed, and it basically replaces the NFA. Like the NFA, it also provides for a covenant not to sue, or CNS. The principal difference is that the covenant not to sue under an RAO arises by operation of law. There's a provision in the statute that actually says this. Those of you who are familiar with the old NFAs recall that they would actually have language in them where the DEP would agree not to pursue the person remediating. The DEP, however, will still be issuing NFAs for unregulated USTs, and in the interim period where there's still ongoing DEP oversight, and this is until, I think it's May of 2012, although it doesn't say so there. Some questions. To whom is an RAO issued? It's issued to the person who's conducted the remediation. So it's basically going to be the PRP. And when is it issued? This is kind of key. It's not issued until after the department has issued all remedial action permits and all fees and oversight costs have been paid to the department. It's a little unclear how the second part of that's going to get implemented, because it's the LSRP who's going to issue it, but the fees get paid to the DEP. So there's going to have to be some means of communication between the two. Some significant questions. What are the standards for issuance of an RAO? Very quickly, there's a difference between the regulation, and I won't read the quote to you up there at the top, and what the statute says. But the key here is that LSRPs are of the view that the key issue is at the bottom here, that the remediation will be protective of human health, safety, and the environment, and DEP is of the view that the standard that's in the regulation has to be implemented, meaning remediated to all applicable statutes, rules, and guidances. So it's sort of DEP back to its old trick, if you will, of requiring all T's be crossed and I's be dotted. That's going to have to play out in terms of how this will be resolved. How does an LSRP make the determination to issue an RAO? Basically, there's this hierarchy here of categories. The first is the LSRP looks to the tech regs, which many of you are already familiar with. Then, absent something in the tech regs that's specifically on point, the LSRP goes to the technical guidelines that have been and are still being rolled out by the DEP. Then, absent something there, the LSRP goes to relevant guidance from EPA and other states, and then absent something there, other relevant, available, and appropriate methods, whatever that means. The DEP in its regs slipped in two additional categories of things that the LSRP is supposed to look at, and it's unclear to me whether this portion of the regs will withstand scrutiny. Basically, the LSRP also must look to the health risk environmental standards established pursuant to, and this is a section in the Brownfields law, and indoor air standards. And to my, this basically is there because of vapor intrusion issues, I think. But it's not all that clear from the regulation. What is the scope of contamination that's to be reached by an RAO? This is not all that different from the NFA. RAOs can be issued for the entire site or one or more areas of concern. But in either case, this is key, in either case, the RAO has to include all other locations to which a discharge originating at the site or the AOC has migrated. Are groundwater and soil media treated differently in an LSRP's decision? And the answer is yes, they are. And the next slides will illustrate that, and I'll try to do this quickly. Under the soil remediation standard, basically the RAO can be issued if all contaminated soil has been remediated, and there are two ways this can happen. If it's remediated to the most stringent soil remediation standard, meaning the old-fashioned residential cleanup standard, as we sometimes refer to it, or if there's use of an engineering institutional control. Similarly, with groundwater remediation, an RAO can be issued if all contaminated groundwater has been remediated to the applicable groundwater quality standard, or, and this large bullet in the middle basically is the description of a natural attenuation process. It could happen there, or this bottom bullet is if you have an approved groundwater remedial action that utilizes an engineering control, like a pump and treat. In the second and third categories, however, DEP must also have established a classification exception area. So you've always got to have a CEA if you have anything other than remediation to the applicable groundwater quality standard. Can an RAO be issued if no remediation is necessary? The answer is yes, but this would occur only in an instance in which a preliminary assessment or site investigation has occurred and the LSRP has certified that the contaminants at the site or the areas of concern meet these three criteria. And again, you have handouts, so I'm trying to do this quickly. You can go back and reread this. When can the DEP invalidate an RAO? Yes, they can. And basically the standard is if the DEP determines that the remedial action is not protective of health, safety, or the environment, or there was failure to implement a required presumptive remedy. Somebody else is going to be talking about that. This bottom bullet point, though, is interesting. The DEP can also invalidate an RAO when it determines that the person responsible for conducting the remediation has implemented a remedial action that will render the property unusable for future redevelopment or recreational use. Basically, what DEP is trying to get at there is they don't want somebody just putting up a fence around a property, capping it, and saying, that's it, and then the property just lies fallow forever. So there's an intent here to make people actually do something affirmative to make the property usable for the future. How may an RAO be reopened or overturned? I think Pat somewhat touched upon this. Basically, there's an audit process, and that could happen. But there are also these three categories of situations on the bottom here, which could happen even after an audit. So don't presume that just because 3 years has come and you have not been audited and the RAO is still in place that necessarily you're home free. It could be 10 years hence. The LSRP himself or herself gets his or her license suspended, they could go back in time and reopen. Basically, the DEP is going to now issue two different types of permits. A soil action, remedial action permit. This is the permit that replaces the deed notice. So, for example, if you have a cap, there'll be a permit that will deal with the operation and maintenance, long-term approval of the cap. And the second type of permit will be groundwater remedial action permits, and those are issued for groundwater natural attenuation or pump and treat. Some details about this. The permits are, who are going to be the permittees? The permittees are going to be not only the person doing the remediation, but also these two categories here. Each owner of the property where the discharge occurred, and each subsequent owner. So if you're, for example, doing a cleanup, and you've sold the property, let's say there's been an ISRA resale, and you now have a new property owner, or maybe there's even a further new property owner, they'll have to be permittees. But the key here is you're still the key permittee. The PRP doing the cleanup is still on that permit. You cannot walk away from the problem like you may have been able to do in the past. Other relevant permitting changes, just very quickly, there were, in the DEP regs, they did make some additional changes. They changed General Permit 4, which deals with activities in freshwater wetlands transition areas. That's been amended to now include these types of remedial actions. They've changed their discharge to groundwater permit by rule to also include this. Thank you very much.
We hope you enjoyed this program brought to you by Flaster Greenberg. For more information, call 856-661-1900 or visit flastergreenberg.com. This program was produced by Professional Podcasts in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, on the web at professionalpodcasts.com. For Flaster Greenberg, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and take good care.